Welcome to the Ask for the Skinny podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Mats Larsson from Sweden. Mats is a founder of Global Energy Transformation Institute. He has over 30 years of consulting experiences, and he is here today to present his latest book, How Building the Future Really Works. Mats, please tell us more about yourself. What is your story and how did you end up writing this wonderful book?
Thank you. Yes, I've spent the past 30 years working as a business consultant and change management consultant, and I've worked in many industries and with different business situations, and I've noticed and worked with many large-scale change challenges in companies, and for the past 18 years, I've been exploring the large-scale change to electric vehicles and to a sustainable society, implementing a number of sustainable technologies and systems. And I've drawn the conclusion that countries will need to build very large resources in terms of electricity generation, power grids, charging infrastructure, and not least build up the competence among many individuals who will need to participate in these programs and projects to change the transport systems to electric transportation. So, and to tell the truth, it's not likely to be possible to change transport systems this rapidly. The UK government, the EU, and air regulators in California have decided to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035. But they have not considered, it seems, the vast investments that will be needed to achieve this.
One of the topics that you're touching, and it's also on your website, is that there's a huge lack of skilled people and skilled labor, and especially on the strategic level, that could help governments transfer into fully electric vehicles. It's really interesting that Sweden has one of the best experiences with electric vehicles, or the longest, because it all started already in the time of the Olympic Games in Lillehammer, if I'm correct.
Those were in Norway, yes.
Sure.
And Norway is the leading country. Sweden is the third country on a global level after Norway and Iceland in terms of the penetration of electric vehicles. And we have Norway started their experiences at the Olympic Games in Lillehammer, and they have expanded their electric vehicle fleets since then. That was in 1994, and at that point, a Norwegian electric car was launched by the name of Think, and as Sweden is the largest country in the Nordic region, we tend to, I believe, we tend to want also to be the leader in most areas. And when Norway takes the lead in this development in the car industry, where we had had a number of, we've had two car companies, Volvo and Saab. Saab sadly defunct since a couple of two decades back, but we see ourselves as a leader, and we have some national pride in this type of leadership. And I believe that that is the reason why we have tried to emulate Norway's success in the electric car area. And and become one of the leading countries. We've been looking a lot at Norway and said, if Norway can do this, Sweden can as well. And if Iceland can do it, Sweden can as well. So it's really, but Norway actually has unique circumstances that makes it possible for them to drive this development in a way that few other European countries are likely to be able to do. So that hasn't been taken into account either in the comparison, because people have thought Norway, rather small country, not particularly suited for this. But in fact, Norway, from many perspectives, is ideally suited for electromobility.
Okay, so in your book, you're writing about this transition and how this transition was not well thought over because all the pooling of the resources needed to enable this transition is just enormous. And you also argue that the market cannot do it on its own because of the large investments, but that the government needs to prepare at least a framework that would enable private initiative to do it. And as we know, most of electric cars in the past 2 decades were bought because of the subsidies. What's your take on that?
Yes, very large investments will be needed in most countries to build the power generation resources necessary for the change. For example, in Germany, they will need almost 150 terawatt hours of electricity to fuel their fleet of 48 million cars when they become electric. And that 150 terawatt hours is equal to 25% of German power generation at present. So that means it will be really challenging for a country like Germany to build and invest in their new power plants, wind turbines, other types of generation resources, and they have stopped using nuclear power, and they closed down all their nuclear reactors. So doing this in the absence of nuclear power will be really challenging. And in addition to this, very large investments will be needed in power grids, because a lot of charging will be done in areas where little power is used today along large roads, motorways, national roads, in parking, in car parks, and in industrial areas where a lot of lorries come and load and unload goods on a regular basis. So there are areas in Europe, industrial areas, where thousands of lorries come every day to load and unload, and they will need, or a large share of those will need to be charged when they do this, and that will require fast charging equipment and very large amounts of electricity that will have to be delivered in high capacity power grids to those areas. So and these needs are not catered for today, and these expansions have not been planned, and the individuals that will be needed to plan and drive these projects will need to be trained in the various technologies and the solutions, and in building the systems that will be necessary to actually be able to deliver well these resources on a user-friendly way.
Okay, I would like to know your take on the offset of electric cars that they make on the, for example, on the other side, because there were some calculations in the media that the carbon footprint of electric car is greater than carbon footprint of gas or diesel powered car, if we take in consideration also the production and the recycling of the car. What's your take on that?
Well, it's possible. I'm not an expert in carbon footprint calculation or life cycle analysis. So I've approached this matter from the perspective of the change management that needs to be done. But I realized that the production of electric cars generates a lot of carbon emissions, and the use of electric cars will require very large resources and investments in infrastructure. So there are definitely pros and cons of electric cars, but one important aspect is that oil is a finite resource, and we can't expect to use oil for any well, for the entire future. So experts in oil production, they say that with the current oil resources that are available and the proven reserves of oil companies, they would last something like 45 or 50 years into the future if production would continue at the present rate. But after these 45 or 50 years into the future, we would have no oil at all left. And that's not going to happen. So we need to prepare for a situation where oil production is going to peak and oil production will then go down. So the carbon aspect, carbon emission aspect, is not the only thing we need to take into account. We will probably experience the peak in oil production sometime in the future, in the coming decade or 2 decades, and we need to prepare for that. And we can't do without transportation systems or with insufficient transportation systems. The needs for transportation increases all the time, and we need to keep in mind not that this change is not only a matter of reducing carbon emissions, it's also a matter of securing transportation resources for the future and for future generations.
Okay, let me challenge you on something you just mentioned. So you mentioned that there's enough oil for 45 years, approximately. And why do you think that the legislation in Europe mandate the end of usage of internal combustion engines in 12 years if there's still 45 years of resources available? Was that a bold move? Is that wrong? How do you see that?
Well, based on my calculations of the resources that will be needed, it will be very, very challenging for countries in Europe to be able to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035. And based on the need for power generation, power grid capacity, and charging infrastructure, it's not likely that we will be able to ban and to stop producing and selling petrol and diesel cars from that year. So I'd say that the decision to ban petrol and diesel cars has been made without doing the in-depth analysis that would be needed to understand what these changes will bring with them. And it has been also without done, the decisions have also been done without an understanding of the entire framework surrounding our transport systems and the use of oil and the use of other resources. We do have too little information, too little knowledge about these things, and we need to rapidly start to build our competence and our knowledge, like the US did, for example, when NASA got the assignment in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy to send a man to the moon and bring him safely back to Earth.
So you're also discussing hyperthinking in society in your book. I think that is an important topic that we need to touch, because if I conclude the decision of lawmakers that they will ban, that they plan to ban internal combustion engines in cars in 12 years was not rooted in reality. That was wishful thinking that has become legislation now. So this could be a huge strategic mistake. Can you can we discuss hyperthinking and how this conclusion came about, even if they are, let's put it mildly, might not be the best, or they're at least over-optimistic? How did this happen?
Well, we've been aware in organization theory and sociology that there's a tendency among decision makers with similar backgrounds to work together and come to conclusions that we sometimes label as being the result of groupthink. That is when people with similar mindsets think in similar ways and come to the wrong conclusions based on assumptions that have not been sufficiently challenged. But groupthink does not illustrate the it could be done in smaller smaller regarding smaller problems or issues at hand, like the invasion, the Pix Bay invasion by the Kennedy administration in the 1960s, where the Kennedy administration and the people there came to the conclusion that Cuba would not be able to defend themselves against an American invasion, but they did, and they could, and they. But this does not illustrate the magnitude of the current misconceptions that are fluctuating or going around in society, where people believe that large-scale change could be achieved on in almost no time at all. We could ban the sales of petrol and diesel cars from 2035 without making any resources available for the change, without making plans for the thousands of companies and organizations that will be needed to participate in the transformation activities and build the new systems that will be necessary. So I suggest that we use the term hyperthink to indicate this these large-scale mistakes and these large-scale misconceptions that are created through our largely lack of questioning of these change ideas that that politicians now turn into law.
If we simplify it a bit, is it possible that decision makers already made a decision and then involved experts that would just bring all the, let's say, all the arguments that they needed in order for their decision to be supported. Could that be a problem?
Yes, I think there's been a lot of circular thinking in these processes going on for more than a decade, basically, because experts in sustainability have talked to politicians saying that we need to change. Politicians have talked to industry, asking them, will we be able to change? And we have started to change programs on a small scale over the past decade or 2 decades perhaps, and we have started to implement electric vehicles. We have started to build charging infrastructure. We have started to discuss and to implement circular economy systems on a small scale, and nobody has up until this point said that these large investments will be needed, and they aren't. Basically, at the beginning of these developments, no large investments will be necessary, and it seems to most people that well, we could do this without a problem. We could just increase the size of electric car fleets, electric lorry fleets, fleets of electric buses, and so on, without having to think of the expansion of infrastructure in any way. But we only have, in the UK, you have 5% electric cars, and many of them are hybrids with small batteries. So you haven't experienced, and no country so far has experienced a situation where we have the majority of cars as electric cars. So in the UK, you will have to use 100 terawatt hours to charge all 32 million cars every year, and you have an annual power generation of 325 terawatt hours. Mm-hmm. So, but nobody has questioned the possibility of expanding electric car fleets indefinitely, or for electric cars to take over 100% of transportation. So that has turned into some type of circular thinking where each group of experts, each group of politicians, groups of industry leaders, they don't question. And then it becomes a little embarrassing, actually, to come at this point for a politician that has been involved in this debate or discussion for 5 or 10 years to come in and say, well, we should perhaps consider the need to invest in power generation and power grids. And because voters may say, couldn't you have told us that before? Shouldn't we have considered this before we started this development and before we made these decisions? So if you have started the development, if you have been participating in the development for a number of years, it's not very likely that you will be the person who says, wait a minute, we need to consider this investment need in large-scale expansion of power grids and power generation.
Could we say that they were completely oblivious to the bottleneck theory, and they were completely oblivious to rising marginal costs when the fleet rises, because existing electricity grid is probably good enough for 1 to 3% of electric cars, but from there on, the marginal costs for the next 3% is huge.
Yes, they have become oblivious to these aspects, I believe, and if the idea has come up in their minds, they have probably felt that it's not for me to ask those questions at this point in time when we have driven this development so far. And I must emphasize also that I don't know exactly when we will, when countries will experience this bottleneck, or when we will find that or in which way we will find that electricity there will not be sufficient amounts of electricity to charge all cars. One signal of that will be increasing electricity prices. Another signal will be that there will be long queues at chargers, at public chargers, because many cars will need to be charged, and there will not be enough chargers or not enough capacity in power grids. And it will take time until we find that power grids break down, or we need to organize brownouts in certain parts of the power grids and so on to make it possible to charge all cars. And the problems, of course, will appear mostly in Europe in the winter, when there will be a bigger need for charging and a bigger need for electricity from other sources as well. In the US, for example, where they have a large usage of air conditioning, the peaks may occur at other times during the year. And for example, air regulators in California made the decision last year to ban the sales of new fossil fuel cars from 2035. And a few weeks after that, utilities asked electric car owners not to charge their vehicles during the Labor Day weekend, which came up in September, I think. So those are signals that we don't have enough electricity available for charging at all times. But it will take quite a long time until we find that power systems are really challenged because of this. There are other factors that are important as well, like the German shutdown of the nuclear reactors and so on, that has already, at this level of usage of the various electricity sources, has put European power grids at risk at during cold days in the winter, for example.
Okay, where can the governments get independent experts? Because most of the experts, or people that are considered to be an expert, are employed by a big corporation supplying the power transmission or power transformation gear. So where do the governments get experts? And there are a lot of technical experts. However, there's a huge shortage of strategic scientists, or not even scientists, but people that have a strategic view of the matter, like yourself. Where can the government source that? And should the big organization and big companies that are involved in electrification of this fleet also employ more, or even develop more experts? Because, for example, let's put it like your example. Now you're on a top of your performance, but you already have 30 years of consulting under your sleeve. So if we want to copy you, we will need 30 years for someone to get the same experiences. And if it's even possible, because you have a special mix, and one of your core advantages is that you worked on so many different projects. And people nowadays, experts, work in one field. So how can we get experts like yourself, and where can we find them? And of course, who's going to do the risk management? Because the implementation of rules without supporting all the resources, it's clearly a risk management failure.
Yes, those are very good questions. I don't think it's that difficult or impossible to build the competence that will be needed. I would have developed a specific knowledge about change and large-scale change projects, but people who will work with this in the future don't need to have my specific combination of experiences. The key is that governments need to build unified resources, teams of experts that work together to solve these particular problems and to analyze the particular issues that we are discussing here. And in the same way that the US government, John F. Kennedy, built NASA and gave them the assignment to send a man to the moon in 9 years' time. And by that time, when they did that, nobody had the competence to analyze how to send a man to the moon. Those competencies had to be built through hiring people who had relevant competencies for the different tasks. And together, they built NASA with that all in all encompassed these different competencies needed and that could combine them in such a way that the task could be solved and could be and the man could be sent to the moon. So the problem today is that we don't have these resources of teams of people who are working on the same problem and analyzing from different perspectives. So governments need to build organizations with the task of driving the change to electromobility, and they need to hire people with the relevant competencies to do this. And we can take other examples, of course, where similar tasks have been set, like the development of computers in the US after and other countries after the Second World War, where this competence was developed, or but nobody knew how to build a computer. They had to develop these competencies and these resources as they went and did various development tasks. So the key is to gather teams of experts with relevant resources, assign them with relevant tasks, and let them do their work and develop the competencies, because they will do that. If you hire individuals with with a strong integrity, they will take these assignments seriously, even if they have worked in the auto industry or if they have worked with in some other position before. They will take these new assignments seriously and build up the competence that will be needed.
Would you agree that trillions of dollars needs to be invested in order to secure the transition to electric mobility?
Yes, definitely. It's a fairly simple calculation to do, but it is really difficult to see where exactly do these investments need to be made. But each nuclear power reactor requires an investment of between $6 and $9 billion. And if you want to do this using wind turbines, which is definitely more challenging, and I don't think we could use intermittent power sources entirely. We would, but then we would need also investment in batteries or other resources to store energy over shorter or longer periods of time, and so on. So the to turn all European cars electric, we would need about, say, 700 terawatt hours of electricity, and that's the generation of 65 nuclear reactors or 200,000 wind turbines, plus storage capacity and so on. So, and the investment in 65 nuclear reactors, 9 of which would be needed in, miscalculation. So say 12 or 13 of which will be needed in Germany only, or in addition to that, investment in power grids, charging infrastructure, more expensive vehicles, and the training of individuals to take on these positions. It will definitely amount to more than $1 trillion of investments.
Okay. And another really important thing is who is the one that should read your book? I understand that there are politicians and all decision makers in high places. Is there anyone else that you believe should read your book in order to understand how the future is built and what are the strategic challenges they need to take upon themselves?
Yes, of course. My book is, it shows the direction forward and it indicates the magnitude of these changes. So many people need to read the book, and it's the only book of its kind. It's the only book that describes these large-scale challenges of building the future and building the technologies and systems of the future, of which electric vehicles and electric vehicle systems is an example. So politicians, business leaders, experts in sustainability and in the various areas involved in electric cars and utilities need to read it, but also people in general who want to understand what the future has in store for us and how we need to organize and finance our activities on national levels and regional levels and local levels to build the systems we need to make the future of electromobility or autonomous vehicles and so on possible.
Thank you. I will include link to your book in the description below. Thank you very much for all these insights. Thank you very much, of course, for your book. And thank you for being my guest tonight.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be a guest on your show, and I'm looking forward to see the reactions from people.